We're here with Jane and Mark, and we are talking about dads and mental health today. It's great to see you. I'm trying to see. Oh yeah, we've got 4 people watching. Hello, 4 people who are watching. It's not told me who you are yet. So I think the first thing we need to do is maybe to look at introductions. So Jane, would you like to tell us where you're from and what you're looking for? I know it's not blind date, this, is it? I was just about.
I don't know. It could be, Kieran. It could be. Might be a bit more interesting, eh?
Maybe. So, who are you, and why are you joining us to talk about dads?
Okay, my name is Jane Hanley, and I'm currently living in Carmarthenshire. My background is I'm a health visitor by trade, but I did my PhD in perinatal mental health a long time ago. Been doing this for probably, I'd say, more than 30 years, really. If I've been looking at postnatal depression initially, then looking at how it affected dads and how it affected babies and how it affected cultures. I am the past president of the International Marseille Society for Perinatal Mental Health, which I know is a very long title, and it's very wonderful, but A, I didn't get paid, and secondly, I managed to put on an international conference in Swansea where we had over 500 delegates from across the world. So all the researchers and the clinicians joined the Marseille Society. I also am a consultant independent trainer for perinatal mental health training, and both Mark and I do training around the country on dads and on mothers and infants. And we've both written a book called Fathers and Perinatal Mental Health, and I've got 2 other books as well. So we do lots of writing together, we do lots of talks together, and we do lots of articles together. And why am I here today? Because it's lovely to be able to have the opportunity to talk to dads and just to find out how they're feeling and what I can add to the pot, really.
Excellent, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here. Mark talked about you quite a lot, so yeah, it's nice to see your face.
I pay him lots of money, Kieran.
I don't pay him enough. So Mark is... when I started Dad Matters, he was the first name on everybody's lips. I had to speak to Mark. He's the one you need to speak to. So it's a real pleasure to get him on. It's like meeting your idol, Mark.
Oh, gee. I am just a valley boy. That's all I am. I got my hoodie on tonight.
Tell us who you are and what your interest in dad's mental health is all about, where it came from.
Yeah, from the past experience 15 years ago now, over 15 years ago, witnessed a trauma. My wife and baby was going to die in the labour ward. What we know now is PTSD, which is an anxiety disorder, witnessing or experiencing a life-threatening event. Didn't know none of this. Michelle went on to have severe post-depression and totally changed my life. Really. So totally changed my life. And it was after breakdown years later, I found out that, like other fathers, I set up a group called Fathers Reaching Out. And I learned off of dads, and we started campaigning, and yeah, we've changed a lot of policies, and obviously with Jane since 2012, and just want all parents supported for the mental health. Definitely.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark.
I didn't know I was going through depression after my son was born for various reasons. I was diagnosed with ADHD at 40, so that was one factor, but lack of sleep, wife Michelle had post-depression, this trauma. You know, no work for 6 months, mortgage to pay, loads of factors going on, you know. So using alcohol, I'm from a valley community where we never talk about mental health, and, you know, I suppress our feelings, get on with it, crack on, you know. And so yeah, it was after setting a group called Fathers Reaching Out, it just really, you know, took me to a different place, and realised other fathers are struggling like myself.
Yeah, you know, Mark, we hear your name quite a lot on the circuit, if you like, and it seems like over the last couple of years, I'm sure you'll agree with me, there's been an explosion in dads wanting to support other dads, professionals having a bit more of an idea of how to do that, and obviously this is where Dad Matters has come from, really, with those sort of collaborations. So it's great to have you on. Thank you very much for both of you.
Thank you. It's always.
So the first thing we're going to talk about...
shirt on as well, just so you know.
He's an honorary dad champion, is what we call him. So the first thing we wanted to talk about was in our groups when we see dads. So we might do 4 or 5 groups over one weekend where we see 10 to 12 dads in each group. And regularly we get asked the question, how do they support mum? So if mum's struggling with postnatal depression or anxiety or other anxiety or depression illnesses, what are they looking for, and is it likely to see it? What can they do about it? So I think maybe Jane, if you can give us maybe a bit of an overview of what are the stats. Dads love facts and figures. We like that sciencey stuff. So
okay.
Maybe that would be a useful starting point.
Sure. Well, in 1986, Professor John Cox and his colleagues came up with this figure of 1 in 10 mothers suffer from postnatal depression. Now, that was revised in 2013 by Professor Catherine Wisner, who said that 1 in 7 mothers are suffering from postnatal depression. But of course, that doesn't encapsulate all the anxiety disorders that there may be, as Mark said, about ADHD or OCD or high anxiety. But on the statistic that we've got as well is, I don't know if you're familiar with purple psychosis, very rare. 1 in 1,000, 2 in 1,000 are the sort of figures that they're coming up with at the moment. But although it's rare, it's not unusual either for some mothers to suffer from some sort of, should we say, no, I wouldn't say psychotic, but certainly being quite poorly because of their perinatal mental illness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of things, looking at it from a dad's point of perspective, what kind of things are they looking for in mums? What kind of things should they be seen as maybe as red flags, or even before it becomes a red flag? Is there anything to...
I think mothers there's always this worry, and it's a myth that perpetuates throughout, that if a mother is depressed, she's a bad mother, and if she's a bad mother, then there's a problem with safeguarding with the child. And very often mothers try to hide how they're really feeling. So the people closest to them will be the ones that will be more alert to the changes in their behavior. And it usually is behavior, because you can sort of list it into 2 things: the physical side, the emotional side, and the behavioral side. Now, as far as the behavior is concerned, you might find that somebody who liked to laugh, who was always interested in what was going on, tends not to be so anymore. They tend to be more withdrawn, tend to isolate themselves, don't find things as funny. And also then have self-doubts as well about how they are coping as a mother. So we'll say things like, you'd be better at it, or I can't stop Jimmy, the infant, I can't stop the infant crying. I'm just, so they have these self-doubts, which make them feel hopeless and also make them feel helpless too. So all the time, the father might be trying to say that's nonsense and that's silly and don't be daft, you're a great mother, but actually they don't feel a great mother. So a mother who's becoming increasingly depressed, not only is her behavior changing, but her mood changes too. So as I said, she perhaps becomes more vigilant about the baby, or she tends to have, tends to leave.
Jane there.
Oh, it looks like Jane has paused herself.
Have I?
It's the West Wales thing, it is.
About 5 seconds, that was all. Yeah. Are you in the mountain? Are you on a mountain?
Yes, I am actually. I am, yeah, but not high enough, obviously, to get the signal.
No worries. Yeah, we only missed a few seconds at the end of that, so...
Okay. Yeah, so all I was going to say really is then and her appearance as well. So in a physical sense, so you might find that she's not able to care as much as she used to in terms of doing makeup or brushing her hair, or even looking at just her general demeanour. Then you think you know as a partner that something is wrong. So the thing to do, if you like, Kieran, you were saying, what can men do about it, is not to say, don't be silly, don't be daft, or, of course you look great, because she doesn't feel great. She doesn't behave as if she's great. So it's always worth sitting her down, or sitting both down together and saying, okay, tell me what you're feeling. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me how life is for you. And allowing the mother to have the time to talk about how she feels. And then she may say, I'm finding everything far too much. Then thinking about how some of those tasks that she finds very difficult can actually be taken up by the father. So he might take over some of the chores as she sees it, rather than thinking she's Superwoman and she can do everything.
I think that's really useful. One of the questions we get often is, how do you spot it? But then how do you talk to mum about it?
Yeah.
How do you have a conversation where they're probably maybe trying to avoid thinking about how they're doing?
Yeah.
How do you have that conversation? And we always kind of lead, and you can tell me if this is maybe we need to change the way we lead with this, but we would always talk about how you've got to have those honest conversations about everything to start with, so that these conversations become easier. And being able to be honest about it, knowing that you're doing it for the right reason. What about your take on health visiting? I know you are a health visitor by trade, so if a dad came to you and said he was really worried about his partner's mental health, what kind of things would you be saying?
I think health visitors are wonderful. I think they're highly undervalued. I think they're marvellous. And certainly in recent years, they've become much more aware of the plight of fathers and how we have been marginalising them in the past. That is true. And some people will say, well, it's difficult to engage with fathers because, and rightly so, you know, they don't want to be in the room when women are talking about things. But equally, we could engage with fathers by making appointments with dads. I think sometimes if they are given a random time, it's not always easy. But we've always got time for the car mechanic, and you've always got time for what time the gas man is here. So making appointments is quite important. Health visitors are looking at the health of the family, so they will know about the care of the infant, and they will certainly know about the care of the mother. And now they're becoming more aware of how important the care of the father is. So looking at listening to how the father feels, first of all, and involving him much more in the care of the infant. Because I think in past generations, dad has always left that to mother. That's always been her domain. But we live in a different society. We don't have the nuclear families that we did have. We certainly sometimes don't have extended families. So the child care, if you like, is now the prime responsibility of the prime carers, being the mother and the father. So health visitors will help to engage the father with the infant much more and to see how rewarding that is. I can remember as a health visitor always saying to the father, come over here, and what I want you to do is blow bubbles at, or go ooh, ooh, ooh at your son. And the father would, for goodness sake, and he would say ooh, 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 and all of a sudden the son would go ooh, ooh, ooh back. So the dialogue started by just showing the simplest things, how he can become involved with his son. And that gives the dad a greater affinity with his son, and also with his partner, because now they're working as a team.
That sounds great. That's pretty much exactly what I expected you to say. Thank you so much for that. One of the things that we're doing, I don't know if you're familiar with the NBO, the Newborn Behavioural Observation.
Yes.
We're doing that now with dads. I actually did my first one over the phone on a video call, which was difficult, but we managed to get through it. I think that those interactions with babies, particularly knowing that babies don't just smile because they've got wind, they're smiling because they're happy about what you're doing. That's really good. We get a lot of dads that say to us that they don't have a relationship with the baby in the first few weeks because babies don't respond to them. When you can show them that they are responsive from birth, even preemies, then we can make sure that dads understand that relationship's really, really important. And also knowing the hormonal changes in dad when they're having skin to skin with their baby, for instance, the right hormones being released at the right times, and it's supporting their mental health going forward as well, isn't it?
Very much so.
Thank you very much for that. So Mark, we're going to come to you now. We've talked about mums. This is one of the things that we need to talk about because this is what dads are asking us constantly. What they don't ask us about is their own mental health. So now we are going to talk to Mark about dads. And one of the things that I found when I started working for Homestart at Oldham Stockport Tennyside, and we were preparing the Dad Matters project, was that there wasn't a lot of people talking about postnatal depression in men. We all talked about how dad's mental health was important, but nobody referred to this specific point in time and why it was important there. And I think listening to Mark, the first time I listened to Mark was probably the time when I realised that we needed to address this with dads before they were experiencing it, so that they could look out for it. So I know, Mark, you do a lot of talks about your own personal experience, but you've also talked to a lot of dads about their experiences as well. Have you got any kind of background into what the statistics look like for men and that kind of perinatal mental health?
Yeah, so if you look at the research, 1 in 10, we know it's far higher than that, because obviously, but I think it was after 76 studies over, I think in 22 continents, 5 continents, 22 countries, they've come up with an average of 1 in 10 fathers, which is pretty high when you think of it. So 75,000 fathers in the UK suffer from some sort of mild, moderate, severe end of post-depression at least. And what do you think? The biggest killer in men under 50 is suicide, and we're not screening fathers for their mental health as we should. Up to 50% of fathers will actually get depression looking after their partners with post-depression. My argument is, okay, if we're not screening, sometimes the fathers I've spoken to, sometimes only dad was struggling, but up to 50% of mums are going to get impacted by the mental health. Anxiety, as we know, is higher in depression. Some of the reports come out, 38% of fathers actually suffer with some sort of depression or anxiety. Worried about their mental health, I should say. That's the NCT did that report, and 73% were worried about their partner's mental health. You know, we know some November done reports that say 1 in 5 dads are totally isolated in the first year of fatherhood. And there was another report by the Mental Health Foundation that said that 39% of young fathers wanted support for their mental health, and 34% of those fathers, unfortunately, not with their child. So this is big area that's not really being visited as it is now. Like,
I think a lot of the work that you've been doing in terms of raising this profile with professionals, with policymakers, is invaluable. I don't think that Dad Matters would be doing the work we're doing directly with dads without that scaffold. And these statistics are only going to get more in depth as we go.
Yeah, honestly, and when you think of it, we found research of after 47%. Fathers in the perinatal period after 47 at risk of suicide at any other time in a man's life. I mean, that's really high. That's a dual diagnosis, that is. But what's happening is, like when I was an advocate for mums or any parent, I used to come across mums who had post-depression 30 years ago, and they were never picked up or screened, and they were going into the services. And that's what's happened with fathers. They actually get diagnosed with depression or anxiety after the perinatal period, and they don't realise that they've could be actually diagnosed with post-depression, or, which does overlap, is PTSD, witnessing a trauma in the labour ward as well, which should be screened and supported as well.
I think one of the things that we've noticed in terms of how dads present with anxiety or depression or mental health issues, it does tend to be later than it should be, and if that's outside of the perinatal period, then all of the stuff that we've got in place in the perinatal period is wasted, because the only options after that then are adult mental health services, and we need to do it earlier. I think I'm sure you'll agree, one of the really big issues is the impact it has on the baby. Mm-hmm. And getting support early supports the baby early, but also knowing how to support the baby's mental health actually supports dad's mental health as well. We've seen it quite a lot with NICU dads and mums, where babies, where they're struggling or they're on the unit, and mums and dads have kept it together for that whole amount of time. And as soon as everything's settled and they're back to kind of a normality for life, that's when the mental health starts to suffer, or they start to acknowledge it. Sometimes that can be a bit late. So yeah, absolutely echo what you've said there.
Oh, yeah, yourself and Dan struggle, obviously, that bond and attachment, and I think it's so important, being in tune with the baby, mirroring, comfort, and fathers should have this knowledge, and that's why the great work you're doing. A lot of parents don't get that knowledge either, with the importance of the mirroring. So yeah, it's like
absolutely. What kind of things? Sorry, Jane. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Kieran, what you're saying about the optimum time really is in the perinatal period, because that's when all the health professionals are there too. So all the people that are au fait with how men may be feeling or have the opportunity to talk, that's the ideal time. You're there, the health professionals, other organisations, which once the baby starts to get older and into past the first year, those services have disappeared.
And a big factor is having past history of depression, anxiety and traumas. You know, dad's got bipolar, schizophrenia, ADHD, ASD. You know, he's struggling with their mental health before the baby comes along. So the antenatal period.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the lack of sleep. You know, I mean, that can, you know, if you've got a dad who's already struggling with mental health, with bipolar, you know, the lack of sleep, you know, and of course it's going to have an impact. And so there's loads of factors why fathers are getting depressed in that time as well. Financial costs, pressure, the fatherhood has totally changed. When my father was a minor, you know what I mean, so it's totally changed.
One of the things that we've come across, maybe in the earlier days, was professionals telling us that dads can't suffer with postnatal depression because it's a hormonal illness. But when you look at there was a study done, it was only a small study that showed that dad's testosterone goes up, estrogen goes up, testosterone goes down. And if you know that, then all of the other stuff, all that situational stuff you were talking about, like sleep deprivation, like financial worries, all of that stuff is the same for mum and dad. It's not going to change. So it's absolutely something to think about. So what kind of things are we looking for? Because as men, you know, Mark, we don't acknowledge our mental state. We kind of ignore it quite often. What things are we looking for to be able to acknowledge what's going on for us?
Yeah, so the fathers I come across, I include myself, you know, obviously avoided situations, using alcohol. Some fathers have used drugs for the first time after the baby's been born. Overeating, undereating, it could be loads of reasons. Smoking more, drinking more, you know, anger, you know, because men will express their feelings. It's got to come out somewhere along the line. And extreme cases of the relationship ending as well. In many cases over the years, so many relationships sadly have come to end because of the early prevention in place. So if your personality has changed during the antenatal period as well as the postnatal period, that's a big factor. So mothers should look out for this as well, not just fathers, you know, everyone, health professionals. If your personality has changed, because as we know, fathers are worried about social services, everything mums worry about, of course what dads worry about as well. So it can happen to anyone really.
I think what you said, Kieran, and Mark as well, sorry, is it's all about honesty too. And if fathers are drinking more, they need to be honest as to why they're drinking more and let their partners, their wives, the mother of their child know that too.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key stumbling blocks is men acknowledging what's different for them. We go through that process of thinking that we're doing all the practical stuff. We can change the baby and feed the baby and do the shopping and provide the money, and we can support our partner, and all the other kids are all dressed and not burning the house down and all that kind of stuff. But actually, we don't acknowledge what's going on for us, and that could be drinking, smoking. It could be not enjoying things that you used to enjoy, not wanting to spend time with your partners. Yeah, absolutely. And acknowledging it in yourself is really important. I don't know whether you'll agree with me on this. It's really hard to acknowledge it when you're going through it, but if you were aware of it beforehand, you can look out for it. Do you know? Does that make sense? I think that's why we do our work antenatally, is so that we can talk to the dads about what they may experience, what might change for them, what to look out for. Absolutely.
And not be in denial either.
It's funny you should say that, because going back that time, I know when my mental health deteriorating, so I withdraw back. I got coping skills like CBT, mindfulness, walking, and the gym. I talk about it more than ever now. For the last 10 years I've been talking about it. But I think before that, I never talked about my mental health. You know, I was one, put a happy-go-lucky smile on. You know, you go, oh, I'm fine, I'm okay. But deep down, I was struggling inside. Like, so, I mean, and like you said, sometimes you might present fathers who may present like myself, and they are struggling. So it's about asking them twice, are you fine? Are you really fine? And give us space as well.
I think I'd like to give you an example of where I've listened to your advice in one of our groups. Ask Twice is the one I'm talking about. We did a group and it went really well. And at the end, one dad was hanging back and he was visibly troubled and really struggling. And so it was just me and him in the room. And I asked, what's going on? How are you doing? And he was worried about his extension being built. It wasn't going to be finished before the baby came, and it was a real pressure on him, and he felt under pressure. And then I asked him again, so how is that affecting your day to day? How's it affecting your partner? What's going on? And actually, when we delved into it a little bit, it was more about his relationship with his baby. He was worried about the baby was going to come along. He would have to focus on something that wasn't the baby and get the extension finished, and he wouldn't have the same relationship. So it became apparent that what he was talking about wasn't the thing that was troubling too much. So asking twice is key, absolutely key. We're going to talk a little bit about support for dad's mental health now. So I know, Mark, you've done quite a lot of work with different groups. So what kind of groups are we looking at, or is there a staged process that dads can go through rather than? I know in my experience, when I'm struggling, I'll wait until I'm in crisis. And my first thing I think about is the GP. But is there stages before that might help?
Well, depending where you are, I think you've got IAP services up in England, yeah. So if you are like in Wales, you can actually bypass the GP if you're not getting the support of a GP and go straight to mental health community services. What I say to is, if you are struggling with mental health and your GP you don't feel you're getting the right support, make sure you go back and advocate. Ask him, I want to, access community mental health services. Don't leave until you're actually getting that proper help as well. NHS website, mental health helplines, there are loads of information on there as well. We know about Andy Mann's Club, they do fantastic work for fathers and men, but they do take a lot of part. Well, all men. Just talk to your fellow friend, family member, talk to somebody. Don't suffer in silence like I did, because I always say the quicker the help, the quicker the recovery, guys. So.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we talk about quite a lot in our groups, it's the closing statement usually is, as men, talking usually is a bigger help than all of the services that you might get later. The first time you talk about it helps you to figure out what it is that's going on for you and acknowledge.
And some fathers just want acknowledgement that there's other fathers going feeling the way they are as well. So, from the milder end, especially the moderate, the severe end, obviously, in more specialist areas, there's a lot of services, but sometimes fathers just want to know, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one feeling like I am. So, yeah, just talk to somebody.
Absolutely, yeah, talking's huge. Third sector obviously we're in Greater Manchester, but all across the country, they're stepping up quite a lot. Over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of support groups. So we have Andy's Man Club in Oldham and Manchester. We've also got one called Directions for Men, who are Warrington, Bolton, South Manchester, which are great. And loads of other talking clubs.
Bluebell in Bristol as well. Been in Bristol area. There's, Dad's of Mine, so yeah, that's another one.
There's absolutely loads. There's loads going on. We've got a lot on our website. If you know of any that aren't on our website, let us know and we'll add them to it.
I got to mention as well, Chasing the Stigma. If you put your postcode in, it tells you what actual service actually in the area as well. So Chasing the Stigma. So it's a database for all services, mental health services around you.
Excellent. We will definitely add that to our website, I think. Brilliant. Jane, is there anything you'd like to add in our conversation around dads? I think it's been great having your perspective, particularly the health visiting perspective, as well as the researcher hat on.
I'd just like to say thank you very much indeed for inviting me to talk here, and it's been a great pleasure. And it's wonderful to see how much work is happening around Manchester area and surrounding districts, because it just goes to show that there is a need, and the very fact that you're able to be so prolific means that there's plenty more to be done, but also it sounds fabulous what you're doing already. So thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming. I think one of the things that we're doing is we're seeing dads. I think all of that work that's been going on has been highlighting why we need to do it, but there aren't any other organisations that I know of that are doing the work that we do with the numbers that we do, particularly in recruiting volunteers. That peer support element of what we do, the home start element, is kind of key. Yeah.
That's why we needed national.
Yes.
Yes. We definitely do.
With money, sponsorship, speak to Keegan, get it national. We want to name all over the place, because we can talk about it all the time, but we need that support in place as well, and that's the most important thing as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to talk to anybody about supporting you to run your own Dad Matters project. We have everything in place now. We've got a manual in place. We've got quality assurance in place. So if you've got the money to do it in your area, there, absolutely. Well, let's talk about it. Thank you very much, both of you, for coming on. It's been fantastic.
Oh, Jane's going to promote something there. Hang on.
Oh, okay.
Buy the book.
We spent an awful lot of time writing this book, okay? So it is about fathers, and it is about perinatal mental health. And everything we've talked about today, and all the good work that you're doing, Kieran, is in here. About mood states, about lifestyle, about medication, about what to do, where to go. And so, yeah, if you can, just remember that Mark and I depend on this for our Caribbean holidays. So the more that are sold, the more holidays. Well, if we ever go on holiday again, this will be the ticket. So yes, I mean, please be. It is written for fathers and health professionals. So please feel free to buy it. That and the online learning that we also do.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mark. We're going to end now, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much, as always, honestly. James.
Thanks. Thanks.
Bye.